Kenny Reynolds, I think, was also preaching over in Mississippi today. I don't know if that was mentioned, but a lot of folks on the road, and it's great to be at a place where there's a lot of talent and people can fill in. I've been places where you almost would tell the preacher, you can't go anywhere because if you go anywhere, we won't have anybody to do the job in your absence, and that's just not the case here. So all that, just say it's a holiday weekend and lots of folks on the road. What do you think of when you think of Labor Day? You don't set up a tree in the living room. You don't put a pumpkin on the front porch. You don't shoot fireworks. But just what is Labor Day? And I kind of had a thought come in my mind, and I said, we can make a spiritual application out of this. So tomorrow, our nation celebrates Labor Day. And when that came up with, this holiday recognizes the many contributions workers have made to America's strength, prosperity, and well-being. If you're an old guy like me, you remember back, 30, 40 years ago, the country band Alabama had a song called 40-Hour Week, and they honored lots of little nobodies, it would seem, which you don't appreciate until you walk up to the ATM and it has no money, or until you walk down that aisle in the grocery store and they don't have the green beans you were wanting to get. Those people that do those jobs every day are working in very thankless positions, but we appreciate them so much. And to every one of you working for a living, or if you've already done that and you've retired, we appreciate that so much. And if you've heard this story 6 times before, just hold up 6 fingers, because some of my stories are repetitive. But there was a time when I was, 10, 12 years old, and I looked around and I said, one of these days, in 100 years, I'm actually going to graduate from high school, and I'll never go back to high school again. And then one of these days, in a really, really long time, when I'm super old and I just can't even imagine that far out, I'll retire. And I'll never have to work a day in my life again if I don't want to. But I looked around and I saw these really, really old people at church. At that point in time, that was people who were like 30. Those were the really old people back then. And they were still going to church. And there were people that were 40 and 50 and 60 and 70, and they were still going to church. And in my little brain, I said, why are they still going? Don't you ever know enough? And you graduate and you just don't go anymore? Well, it's just not like that in the church, is it? So, when is Labor Day? When do we retire from church work? When do I get a day off? That's an interesting thought, huh? Let's open up our Bibles. Paul's got some good stuff to tell us, and I love going to his writings. 1 Corinthians is where we're going to head here. 1 Corinthians. Chapter 15. And we're going to read the very last verse in chapter 15. So if you're scrolling like me, scroll and scroll and scroll to the bottom of that screen. And 1 Corinthians 15:58. Paul says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord." It's got a lot of meat in it. I've actually got a piece of that verse highlighted, and I'm not even going to talk about that tonight. All right? Be steadfast. He says you should keep on keeping on. with what you're doing. A lady that taught one of my classes in high school called it stick-to-itiveness. If you start it, keep doing it. Immovable. You know anything about immovable? You ever try to dig up a stump right after you cut down the tree? Immovable, all right? Always abounding in the work of the Lord. And I spend too much time in the teen class, so I sometimes stop and say, do you know what that word means? What does it mean to abound in the work of the Lord? All right? I figure out where I am in my notes. All right? To abound means to exist in large numbers. We've had some warm weather. We've had some sunshine. Anybody got fire ants in the yard? Oh, yeah. You go out and you kick a fire ant hill, and what happens? They are abounding. They exist in very large numbers. And it seems in my yard, if you poison the ant hill, they move 15 feet over and start over again. I don't understand that. But that's the way we need to be in the work of the Lord. All right? Abounding. When I wrote abound in my notes, you know what I thought of? I thought of coming to Farley on a Sunday night in the summer. And Don Wood walks in with 2 big old 5-gallon buckets. And it depends on what he's been picking. Is it these log-sized cucumbers? Is it truckloads of tomatoes, corn, whatever it might be? If you're a gardener and you're good at it, and there's a time in the season you are abounding, all right? Are we that way as Christians? Or are we sometimes more of a getting by than an abounding? Do we find ourselves doing the bare minimum? All right. Do we wish we had a day off? I've been doing a lot of work for God. Can I take September off? When do I get a break? All right, let's go to the Old Testament. And if you're tapping in the wrong place, you're suddenly not even on the Bible app. Exodus is where I'm going. Exodus chapter 20. And I'm going to pick up at verse 8. Exodus chapter 20 at verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. You nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who's within your gates. Back before we even really understood that you could be overworked, God said, you need to take a day off every now and then. Okay. All right. I wonder if that can be found in the New Testament. Do we find a day off in the New Testament? Let's go over there. Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11 and verse 28. He's talking about hard-working folks like you guys. Verse 28, come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. All right? How is that the harder I work for God, He's going to give me rest? What's that? All right. I will give. You notice the tense on that? That's future tense, isn't it? That's something promised in the future. All right. Well, when's it going to be? When's it going to be? I'm excited about this. Let's go over to Hebrews chapter 4. Keep digging here. We're going to find the answer. Hebrews chapter 4. The very first verse of that chapter, the Hebrew writer says, "Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it." So, there's a rest coming for the people of God, but he gives us a warning that we might somehow miss out on it. I wonder how that might happen. I don't want to miss out on that because I really want a day off. All right. Let me see where I am. I'm way ahead of myself here. No, I'm not. I'm good. Paul, that's where you just go, yeah. You're where you need to be. Life is grand. All right. I know where I need to be now. Let's look down at verse 9. Hebrews 4, verse 9. "There remains therefore a rest for the people of God. For he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his works as God did from his." Who are we talking about there in verse 10? Who finished doing his work and is now resting? I think that's Christ. He came and did some work and he went back to heaven. Verse 11, "Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest, lest anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience." So he clears it up there a little bit in verse 11. I got to keep on keeping on while I'm here and while I'm alive and while I'm able to work, because I might miss out on that rest if I don't. All right, and I see everybody looking at the screen. I'm flipping ahead of me. Are you already in Revelation? Revelation 14 and verse 13. "Then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them." So when do I get a day off? When I get to heaven. Are you excited about going to heaven? I know I am. I got to tell a story about some folks, because they're good folks, and because Sister Rose is here and being so attentive. They moved to Huntsville, I guess about the same time we did. And I don't remember if it was Sister Rose or Brother Ernie. We're getting on up in years, and we're going to come to Huntsville, and we're going to slow down a little bit. And we're going to rest. And I don't know, the year went by, and Brother Ernie was an elder here at Farley. And such fine people, such hard workers for the Lord. You don't really get a day off while you're still here and able to work, do you? You keep on working. You keep on working. I've been so excited about this school of evangelism and this card writing campaign and some of the other things. If you're not involved, why are you not involved? We are working toward a day off, but it's not about Labor Day tomorrow. We're working toward a day off one day in heaven. And I got good news. We're going to finish early tonight, and you're going to have time to go write some cards before it's even 6 o'clock. So I want to encourage you to get involved in that. If you haven't already, even if it's the other folks' turn to write cards, but that's okay. We got some visitors here. Did you know that even if you're visiting here tonight, you can write a card and say, "Thanks for coming. But I'm so looking forward to that. That's one of those things, I guess the older you get, the more you start to appreciate where you're going to be one of these days. And as I say so often in the teen classroom, I'll look at one of the kids and I'll say, give me a 3-digit number. And somebody will say something like 642. And I'll say, where are you going to be in 642 years? Because you'll just be getting warmed up somewhere. And that's a big thought. To think of all of the centuries that we're going to hang out and talk to Moses and get to see Brother Ernie Lawson again. And I mean, it's going to be awesome. I'm so looking forward to that time when we can be together again in heaven. It may be that you're not ready to consider that tonight because you've got some spiritual issues in your life. If there's a spiritual issue in your life, let's take care of it tonight. I want more than anything to have you hanging out in heaven with me. It'd be so awesome. Maybe that we can baptize someone into Christ tonight, or someone needs to repent of a sin. Caleb's going to come up and lead us in an invitation song, and like I said, don't forget, we need to write some cards and encourage some people tonight. So if you have any need, please come as we stand and sing.